This is a $1 billion industry statewide, and there's over 14,000 employees, and that doesn't include the homeowners. There's 14,000 homeowners. So total, you're looking at about 28,000 New Mexicans that derive their income from these short-term rentals. It is a huge industry. Now, that is the greater economic impact. We're talking about all the
So
businesses
say that again.
benefit
When you
from
say
that.
economic impact, yeah, what does that include? Welcome to Albuquerque Real Estate Talk, episode 576. It is, well, let's see, second week of April. We'll call it second week, kind of end of the first week. Anyway, of April 2026. It's Tego Venturi, not with Tracy Venturi this week as normal, but we have a guest, Carl Vidal, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to be talking about short-term rentals and the short-term rental business in particular. Before we do that, I've got something I'm pretty excited about. I spent a little bit of time here creating a new website to show what's going on with the real estate market in Albuquerque. You can see it at reabq.com. You can see it up here, REABQ, and it's Albuquerque Real Estate Market Insights. And I've got a landing page. It gives you all the monthly metrics here. It has charts, it's got graphs, it's got data. It's got a one sheet you can print out. You can explore these charts. And like this one, I'm looking at median sale price compared to, let's say, median price of new listings, right? So you can see a comparison and go through that. If you really want to dig into the data, that's all monthly data. One thing I also added here that doesn't always come into context when we're talking about the MLS data is some of the outside sources. So I included the Zillow Home Value Index, as well as the FHFA Home Price Index. So again, REABQ, I'm going to keep adding to this as we go. There's a lot of good information available to keep track of what's going on in the market these days, and I'm trying to bring it all into one place so people can have an easy place to check out what's going on. So, okay.
I'd just like to say before you introduce me, real estate's local.
Yeah.
And you have done such a phenomenal job of giving local data to local people to look at real estate.
Yeah.
And even, it's just remarkable what you've done and how easy it is to browse through there. I was on there a couple days ago when you launched it on, I saw it on Facebook, and I was just blown away.
Well, thanks for that. No, I appreciate it. I mean, one of my things that really triggered me into, and really triggered is the right word, into digging into this market data and putting out good data is the poor data that we were getting from some of our local news sources. And I know I don't need to talk to you about our local news sources, but they're just copy pasting API stories, national stories, and pretending like that's relevant to what's happening in the Albuquerque real estate market. And so that's why it really this is 10 years of this now, where I've been like going, okay, I got to get the real information out there. So I appreciate that. This is just the next evolution. And the fact that we now have these AI tools that we can build stuff like this relatively simply. I mean, okay, simple is not the right word, but I didn't have to write a line of code to build that site, right? You know that.
Yeah.
You're familiar with it. Yeah.
Tell it what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Carl, let's introduce you. Carl Vidal, you are a property owner, property manager. You have your own properties. You are a realtor.
Yes, sir.
But your niche or niche, depending on how you want to say it, is short-term rentals.
Correct.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for disclosure purposes, I am a realtor with R1 Property Management.
Okay.
And I own a company called Irvy Homes Vacation Rentals. And my goal at Irvy Homes is marketing for short-term rental business owners.
And bring up my site page here just so I can show.
You.
This is your website here, Carl.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So we deal in luxury homes here mostly in New Mexico, but we're also in Arizona and Texas. And I help homeowners to maximize the revenue on their short-term rentals by a variety of strategies we have in place to hit the perfect occupancy at the highest nightly rates with wide distribution. And I'm really good at what I do. Here in Albuquerque in revenue, I'm double the size of my nearest competitor. So I do Irving homes, and then I also am an Airbnb community leader for New Mexico, along with Shane Delinsky. There's two of us in the state, and we help to coordinate hosts to be better hosts and to learn how to host a short-term rental, how to get good guests, how to keep your property up to date, basically how, not to do it bad, because when someone comes to New Mexico, we want them to have an amazing time. I'm also a board member of Visit Albuquerque, an incredible organization where our goal is to bring more tourism dollars into the state and to ensure that when our tourists do come to New Mexico, they are having a fantastic time in the city, and that they're also, shown what kind of things Albuquerque has to offer, all the great museums and local businesses and things of that nature. Whether they're staying in a hotel or a short-term rental, doesn't matter. We want people to come to Albuquerque and truly experience the great parts of our city.
And you also are involved in an organization in New Mexico called the Short-Term Rental Association, correct?
Correct.
And so what is that group?
Yeah, so the New Mexico Short-Term Rental Association is a group of hosts. There's over 200 of us that have now joined, and we get together. The primary goal is to become better hosts. And then also, we just do a lot of education, whether it's educating hosts on how to be better hosts and have great stays, or whether it's educating our political leaders about, what short-term rentals do and how they operate and what are some of the struggles that we face.
Yeah, so it's like most trade organizations, that's what they do. It's about serving their membership, educating their membership, as well as advocating for their industry, correct?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and we have a really robust industry. We've got a great board. We have members from all different parts of the state on the board. So I think we do a really great job, and we've been growing like crazy, which I'm very proud of.
So if somebody wants to learn, if they're a host and they want to learn about the Short-Term Rental Association here in New Mexico, how do they connect with you?
Yeah, so we do have a website. It is newmexicostra.org, and you can learn more about the association. And if you are a short-term rental host, we really encourage you to join. There's 14,000 hosts. We're a little over a year old as an organization statewide, and we've already got 200 members. Every time a host finds out about us, they've been joining. And I think it's just a tremendous opportunity to really keep growing that in scope.
Well, and just, working together to be better as any industry is always good. So that's great.
Absolutely.
So this, we're looking at your website and we're like going, okay, you're not just a casual, hey, I've got this property, I don't know what to do with it. Maybe I'll furnish it and make it a short-term rental. You are running a business. You are running a profession serving people that are coming to New Mexico that need short-term housing.
That is correct. We have homes that are geared to be short-term rentals. A lot of them are still used by the homeowners, but our goal is to offer fabulous luxury properties of short-term rentals.
Got it. And that's your niche. And there's all different types of short-term rentals, and just like anything, they all get lumped together into one bucket. Is that probably what happens a lot, at least in the public discourse?
In the
Is
public
that the right word?
eye, yeah. In the public eye, there is definitely a tendency to say all short-term rentals are the same. And there is a tremendous amount of difference between the short-term rentals. And I think one of the things we do need to remember, though, about all the short-term rentals is they're all small businesses.
Yeah.
And within that, there are a variety of different small businesses that cater to different markets. Some of them are really specifically covering like midterm stays for contractors. Some of them are geared more towards tourism. My houses, in particularly on Irving homes, we try to focus on getting contractors in some of these long-term stays, but then we backfill them with guests. Because the hard part about the midterm stay market, and this is, call it 30 days to 1 year.
Yeah, and just for people to understand, we've got long-term rentals, which is basically usually 6 months a year, right? You've got midterm rentals that are generally month to month, and you have short-term rentals, which are classified as things 30 days or less for the most part, right?
Typically, yes.
That's the classification. Okay. And then, So what are you finding? Well, I'm sorry. Tell me what else we need to understand about short-term rentals in New Mexico.
Well, there's 14,000 short-term rentals in New Mexico. I wrote a study, the Economic Impact Report of 2023 for short-term rentals, and I did that for the New Mexico Short-Term Rental Association.
Yeah, I had it pulled up here a second ago. You can find
Yeah,
that on your website at Derby Homes, and then there's a study you can download. So yeah.
yeah, thank you. And yeah, thanks for pulling that up. So this is a $1 billion industry statewide, and there's over 14,000 employees, and that doesn't include the homeowners. There's 14,000 homeowners. So total, you're looking at about 28,000 New Mexicans that derive their income from these short-term rentals. It is a huge industry. Now, that is the greater economic impact. We're talking about all the
So
businesses
say
that
that again.
benefit
When you
from
say
that.
economic impact, yeah, what does that include?
Yeah, so that's going to include a tourist comes here, or maybe not a tourist, maybe it is a contractor who comes out to work on the Intel plan or at Netflix, right? They are in the community and they're spending their dollars in New Mexico. And those dollars are going to gas stations, they're going to restaurants, they're going to the property owner, they're going to, the museums and all the things people go to visit. So, we're in a very competitive situation with the short term rental market against the states around us. Arizona, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas all have tremendous offerings for short term rentals. And whether you're a contractor coming here to visit or whether you're a tourist looking for a place to go, some people prefer that short term rental. And so it's a very competitive industry where we're bringing in those dollars and that leads to that economic impact.
So let's take the other side. As you know, there's a fair amount of controversy about short-term rentals,
Mhm.
to say the least. And a lot of it is it goes along with that whole, not in my backyard. I literally heard somebody say this. I love using short-term rentals and VRBO and Airbnb when I'm traveling, but I just don't want it in my neighborhood. Right? I've literally heard somebody say that, and they didn't seem to see the hypocrisy in that.
Yeah. No, we definitely do see it. So, first off, here in Albuquerque, there are laws in place to make sure that short term rental owners are operating in a good manner. And we have a good neighbor policy
Well,
where,
tell me more about that. When you say good neighbor policy, what does that mean?
yeah, so there's certain things like you're not allowed to have too many people at a house. Under City of Albuquerque law, you're allowed 2 people per bedroom plus an additional 2 at the house. And that's usually for like a pull-out couch or something of that nature,
Sure.
right? So if you have a 3-bedroom house, you're allowed 2 people per bedroom for a total of 6 plus an additional 2, bringing you to 8. Well, if you're slamming or, occupying 16 people in a 3-bedroom property, you're not being a very good neighbor,
Yeah, no, that's yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
No one
No,
wants to live next to a party house.
right.
And there were some bad actors, I would say, prior to probably 2022.
Mhm.
There was in particular a house up in Four Hills that didn't have any carpet or anything. They just had concrete floors and a pool, and they were throwing raves.
Oh my
And that,
gosh.
right, no one wants to live next to
No,
that.
no.
And I think the city acted properly in saying we're going to put a defining occupancy on these. So if you're a neighbor and you've got someone with a party house next to you, you can call and report it. And if they get 3 strikes, they're out. They lose their city permit. The city can shut them down. So that's one of the things of being a good neighbor, right? You can't just have a out of control short-term rental, and it's just like a long-term rental. If
Right.
you are bringing in a drug house as a long-term rental, right? We have city laws to take care of that and to ensure that, we're creating a good community.
Well, and I think the interesting thing, it's just like any new technology, and let's face it. I mean, this is relatively new technology in the sense that Verbo, Airbnb are technology platforms, right?
Mhm.
It's just like Uber kind of, right? It's a platform that now connects a property owner with a tenant,
Mhm.
right? And the the governments and the policymakers have had to scramble to catch up because it got ahead of itself. And what you're saying now is that's kind of back in line from, like you said, there was, the notorious party houses. You hear stories about that. And of course, you always hear the one-off, anecdotal stories about, something that happened. I've never seen it, but I've heard it happened, right? And so that's what people sometimes use for their arguments. And I hear that on all sides of all different arguments. So
Yeah, and I think it's important to note the number of people that we're hosting in New Mexico annually. And I do have that number here somewhere, and it's not on the top of my mind. But, we're doing $1 billion, 17,000, stays. And I mean, we're hosting hundreds of thousands of people per year, and you're not seeing it in the news
yeah,
because 99% of these short-term rentals, people have zero issues with. In fact, all my neighbors, they love my short-term rental. If we ever do get a problem guest, which happens extremely rarely, but if we ever do, I'm on top of it within an hour and we're working on getting them out of there.
yeah.
Versus if you get a bad neighbor, you could be stuck with them for years.
Well,
Right.
Patrick Brenner did a piece, I think you saw it, where he does, it's what, Southwest, dang it, he's going to hate me for not remembering.
Southwest Policy Institute,
It's Southwest Policy
I
Institute.
believe.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. And he did a piece on the kind of the untold story of the short-term rentals, that these are mom and pop operations. I don't know another term for it, but these are small business owners. These are people that are using this to supplement their income versus some other options that they may have. And it really does have a big economic impact, like you said, but it's not on the big corporations. It's the small local people, helping pay their bills. And we think about some of these rural communities, where I say rural, but I think I said earlier, like Lincoln County, right? I think about Lincoln County, right, where it's a tourist destination, and it's a way for somebody that's not a big hotel owner or something like that to benefit from that and be a small little entrepreneur. Little, is that the right word? No, I don't know.
And it's really interesting. I often say this. We call them small businesses, but some of these operations are so small, I don't even know if you can classify it as a business. These are literally families renting out their home to try and make a little extra money, to try and help cover that mortgage payment, or to try and send their child to college, right? Or maybe a private school. It is money that you can generate from rent to help contribute to your financial well-being. But if you're looking at a short-term rental as a pure business, it is a tremendous amount of work that is very hard to stay on top of and deliver a excellent stay for guests. And when you look at the total profitability here in New Mexico, no corporation is going to look at these houses and say, I can make a positive business return on this. By the time you get through all of the platform fees, the taxes, the lodger's tax, the hospitality tax, the federal tax, the state tax, right? There's not much left over. And in a lot of cases, these businesses...
Property tax.
Right.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And, we've actually seen in Albuquerque, we've gone from 3,000 short-term rentals down to just a little over 2,000 now.
Okay, well, I'm one of those, or Tracy and I are one of those.
Right.
We had some short-term rentals during the pandemic days, which actually worked out great because there was a big need for it. But we decided this is not the business for us. And I think that's my question is, what would you tell somebody that says, hey, I can rent it, for a year on a lease at whatever, $2,000 a month, or I can, put it in a short-term rental, put it on Verbo, and I can get $3,000 a month or whatever it is, right? I got to furnish it. What would you tell somebody when they're balancing those two options?
Yeah. Not every house makes a good short-term rental.
Yeah.
That's very critical to know. As a realtor, I help clients find homes that make great short-term rentals because it's very hard to be profitable. And it is, as you guys found out during the pandemic, it's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
you get into the wrong property and it can't generate enough revenue,
Hmm.
the work's not going to be worth it. And so, you really have to start with the right property, the right amenities, the right location, and then build from there. How can you differentiate yourself in the market with a short term rental? And sometimes it's really wild. Sometimes you could have a house that does, say, $40,000 a year in annual rent. You make a couple of changes with some key amenities, and all of a sudden you're at $85,000 to $90,000 a year in rent. So it really takes that expertise to figure out what is the proper house to do this. And if it's not the proper house, I promise you, you'll want to exit the market because it's hard work.
It is. It is. It's not for everybody, and people need to, really think about what it's going to take if they want to go down that route. What else? What advice would you give to somebody that has a short-term rental, or maybe a couple short-term rentals, or a pool of short-term rentals right now, just to stay relevant and make sure they're doing everything right and they don't get a lot of pushback on what they got going on?
Yeah. Well, first thing, if you are a host, you have to keep your guest in mind. You have to. They have to have a good stay. The house has to be clean, has to have modern amenities, and it has to deliver a great experience. We never want someone coming into the state having a bad experience with a house, and that's the reason they never come back,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it's critical that everybody is focused on, I need to take care of this guest, right? Secondarily, you have to have great rules in place. What are the rules of this rental? All right. No parties, 100%. Like if someone asks me, can I have a birthday party? Absolutely not. All right. Not happening because, and typically the problem isn't the guest renting the house. Typically it's the people they invite over
Sure.
who are not financially responsible for the house
Yep.
that create the problems,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So we're not doing parties. We're not doing anything like that. I've got a rule list this long on every rental that really defines how to have a good stay where both we're happy as the neighborhood, we're happy as the homeowner, and we're having a great time as the guest. And I think that's really how we get into having great stays, if that answered the question pretty
Yeah,
well.
no, I think that's good. I think people need to not think about it as, oh, well, let's see how this goes. They need to really look at it as a business and really have a business plan and decide, okay, we're doing this or we're not doing this. Now, let's say somebody has a property and they don't want to do all that work. Are there property managers out there that do that for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the location. Across the state, there's some really great property managers up in Santa Fe and Lincoln County. I'm one of the only licensed realtor managers here in Albuquerque market. And we do a really great job with Irvy Homes R1 Property Management. There are some other, property managers as well out there, but they're not as big. And some of them who have, similar number of houses, like I said, have about half the revenue volume of what we do.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Okay. Profitability of this business. When you got into this business, you went into saying, okay, I'm going to pay this much in property taxes.
Yes,
you know
sir.
where I'm going. And it's a residential property in New Mexico. Residential properties get assessed at a certain level. Residential properties also benefit from this statute that says property taxes can't increase more than 3% per year. Actually, what it says is the assessed value can't increase more than 3% per year, but basically works out to 3%. So, Sam, bring up my screen. So, Bernalillo County, March 31st, 2026, put out this press release. We want to talk about this. So, Damian Lara, County Assessor for Bernalillo County, I've had him on the show here before. He has come up with a policy regarding short-term rentals and defining short-term rentals as basically commercial properties, no longer residential properties. Do I have that right so far?
In his view, yes, that's what he's done.
Correct. Okay. I understand where you're coming from. I know, like, if we go back like 2 or 3 years at the state legislature, there was some. I don't want to go too. We were talking earlier. We could spend hours talking about this one little topic.
Right.
But let's try to cover it. But just a little bit of background. There was some legislation at the legislature a few years ago that was trying to do a better job defining what if short-term rentals are defined as residential or commercial. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. And what happened with that legislation?
Yeah, so I think just four things that are kind of going on
Okay.
with the taxes here.
Okay.
All right. So dating back, the last time we've had a tax kind of update for residential taxes was in the 1990s, I believe. All right. And it defined what a residential home is, and it has the 3% cap. And then for Verbos have existed since the 90s, right? Airbnb came out in like the early 2000s.
Mhm.
But for the last, 30 years, tax assessors have said short-term rentals are residential and they've taxed them as residential properties. Well, recently, the county assessors in 4 counties of our 33 have come out and said, we're looking at this definition and we're interpreting it a different way. And you can see it in the blog post there. The mission of interpreting it a different way is to help with a housing shortage that they're declaring. And they want to essentially tax short-term rentals out of business. All right. By raising the property taxes, they take away any incentive for our small businesses. And it's one of the reasons we've seen here in Albuquerque 1,000 small businesses close. And that's a huge deal, right? We're talking about people spending their livelihood and investing in a business, and then it's taxed out of business. So the legislators saw this coming, and back in 2024, they stepped in and they said, 2025, they stepped in and they passed a House memorial that says, number one, we want to study this. We want to see what's going on with short-term rentals. We see 4 county assessors out of the 29 feel differently about these taxes. And so, it's not good to have just one elected official making a policy change across the state. And so they asked the county assessors to stop what they're doing, to not reassess the taxes, and to allow the legislators to look at the issue, study it, and then create policy that will clarify what's going on with the residential status of a short-term rental. That House memorial was passed unanimously by the entire House of Representatives
That
of New
never
Mexico.
happens.
I know.
I know it's just a memorial. It's not a statute, but it's a memorial. At least it's saying, hey, we've got to look at this.
Yeah. And 100% unanimous of saying, let's look at this and please don't proceed with these assessments. Well, 4 of the county assessors chose to proceed anyways. That's Bernalillo County, Lincoln County, Taos County, and Santa Fe County. And they reassessed people. Some people got tax bills with a 600% increase.
Yikes.
All right. Yeah. And what's sad is a lot of those tax increases were on homes that families have owned for generations. And all of a sudden they're faced with losing a property that has been in their family for generations because the tax bill now went up 600%. And so I'm very passionate about this. And I'm like, this isn't right. We need to have our government look at this. And we've got a 60-day session coming up in 2027. I am pretty confident that this is going to be addressed legislatively in 2027 and that our elected officials are going to look at this and make a determination of what is the right thing for short-term rentals.
In the meantime, Bernalillo County and the other 3 counties you mentioned have basically said, we are going to tax short-term rentals as businesses, as commercial property. Is that a fair way to say it?
So not only did they take away the 3% cap, because now, you can take your property up to their current value of what they think it is. You're also paying a higher tax rate on top of it. So you're getting a double whammy here of tax lightening on your property taxes. That's what the county assessor did. Now, what's interesting in Bernalillo County, and this is kind of the 4th point here, is the county treasurer, Tim Eichenberg.
Sure.
And I don't know if you've had him on the show.
I have not.
Wonderful guest, But Tim Eichenberg looked at this and said, this was done improperly in Bernalillo County. And this is not following state law. And he as county treasurer, has the authority to correct errors. And he said, and this is in 2025, that an error was made and he turned back the taxes to the original assessed values, overriding the county tax assessor's work. And Damian Lara then went to Taxation and Revenues Division and said, hey, he can't do this. And the Taxation and Revenue Department came back and said, we're not getting involved in this. And
you guys go work it out.
Well, and they essentially said, that this is happening and we're not getting involved. This is a county map. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have one county assessor who is looking at the law that has historically treated short-term rentals as residential businesses. And we've got 29 other county assessors who are saying, no, these are residential. We're leaving them as is. And then we've got, dating back to the 90s, a interpretation that they're residential. And the county treasurer agreed with that and corrected what Damian Lara did. And that's where we're at currently. So then recently, our elected assessor, Damian Lara, released a couple of press reports and an article in the Albuquerque Journal saying he's got this new thing and is creating a statewide initiative. It's really the same thing he did in 2025. Nothing has changed here. He's just trying to, I think, create credibility in what he's trying to do by putting it on the website, and it's really not changing anything. I think they need to wait till 2027 to allow both our House of Representatives, the senator, and the governor to look at this issue and correct it.
Well, I think the fact that both the treasurer and the assessor have a different interpretation of the same statutes from the state is a pretty big red flag that they should wait. And now,
and 29 other assessors as well have that difference of opinion.
So let me take the straw man argument here, I guess, is, well, it's a business. Why shouldn't it be taxed as a business? That's the argument.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to look at, we talked about these are small businesses, but if you go on my economic impact study and you look at the home usage, and I've got the statistics here, of the 14,000 short-term rentals in New Mexico, 49% of them are rented part-time, less than 6 months a year, and the majority of those are rented less than 2 months a year. All right. So let's say you want to, lease your property for 2 months while you go on a trip to Mexico City, right? All of a sudden you're looking at tax lightning because you rented your house.
Mm-hmm.
At a bare minimum, you're going to get reassessed, and then you have to go spend 10, 15 hours fighting with the government saying, I just rented it out for 2 months. I don't think you need to reassess me. We then also have the semi-full-time owners, and these are people that rent their homes out between 6 months a year to, let's call it 11 months a year. All right. Mm-hmm. This is 36% of the market. All right. And these people are renting their property a good majority of the time, but they're also using it for personal use.
Got it.
They are staying there. So is it a business or are they generating extra rent? Now, it's real interesting in New Mexico. If you rent your home out for over 30 days, it's not a business. You're renting your home, but that's not a business, right?
Yeah.
But if you rent it for 29 days,
suddenly it's a business.
You're a business.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right? And that it is
interesting. Right. And I never thought about the context of the person that's, let's say they're the snowbird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part-time here, part-time somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or, half-time here, half-time somewhere else. Well, it's still their primary residence.
Yes.
Right. But it's not. Yeah. So I think that's the thing with this argument is, or this debate is that it's complicated. It's not just like, okay, and this is what, and it's just, you can't just draw the line and say, well, it's a business because it's being rented out for less than 29 days. So,
and I have one other, example here, and this is for the full-time rentals. Okay. Because 10% of our Short-term rentals are full-time. Year-round, they're rented.
Mhm.
But let's take a look at those, and I'll give you an example. And I have numerous homeowners that fall in this category. All right. I have one gentleman, beautiful family. They've got 3 kids, a wife. He is a military member, lives in New Mexico, has this beautiful home. They furnish it. It's just a fabulous property. He gets stationed out in California and he has to move. So now he's faced with the choice. Do I sell the home? Do I sell all of our furniture? What do we do here, right? And he says, you know what? We want to live in New Mexico. We want to come back to New Mexico. We love Albuquerque. And so he moves. He turns his house into a short-term rental. He's stationed now in California, but coming back to New Mexico. And excuse me,
Yeah.
hit my voice, but so he's coming back to New Mexico. He's renting his property out full time, but now we're saying, hey, you're a business. You should have rented it full time and you wouldn't be a business. And now he's being hit with tax lightning with, a 200% tax increase on his house because he's a military member who got reassigned to a different location. It just doesn't seem ethically correct to look at our members of the Albuquerque and New Mexico community and say, if you leave for work and you still want to come back, we're going to tax your property out of your hands.
Yeah, and I will say, so there's this argument. It was interesting because the press release was all about this, this is going to solve our housing shortage crisis, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that thrown out for different things, right? We're going to ban, large, entities buying single family homes, right? That was a red herring. That was not really
Yeah.
a thing. I mean, yes, there was a few, but it wasn't like a big deal. So I kind of feel like this is that. It's like we're going to solve the housing crisis by shutting these down. It's not a lot of homes. It's
We're
a drop in the
talking
bucket. Yeah.
less than 1% of properties are done as a short-term rental. And keep in mind, of those less than 1%, only 10% of those are full-time.
Yeah. And so I understand the argument and I understand the not in my neighborhood, argument in what people want. But you can have a bad neighbor everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully,
Right.
it happens all the time. I think with a short-term rental as a neighbor, you maybe have a little bit more leverage because they're going to call you, Carl, and say, hey, these people are misbehaving versus a neighbor that's permanent. You kind of like,
You're very limited in options.
yeah. I mean, you can go
Right.
fight with them. But anyway, so back to this county tax thing, I just want to clarify. So what Bernalillo County has said, and I wrote a blog on this, is they've said if your property is showing up on, one of these platforms, Verbo, Airbnb, you're renting it for 29 days or less, they are going to assume it's a business
Mhm.
unless you approve otherwise, right?
Yes.
So the burden of proof is
At least the assessor, the treasurer who has overruled the assessor, is taking a different route on that. And
so how's that going to work out?
well, I don't know, and there's a big issue here that just within the government, the communication between the two of them, at one point,
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, it shouldn't be that way. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's going to get figured out. Ideally, they're going to let the state legislator figure this out. Let's have our elected House of Representatives and senators look down and define what is the correct use here and how should we schedule that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. We could keep going, Carl. We kind of did two different topics. We talked about the business of short-term rentals. We talked about the government stuff going on with taxes in particular and how that's getting addressed. I think the thing with the tax policy, the biggest takeaway for me is that what the state has as statute for taxes is vague. It's not clear. And I think part of that is, again, technology getting ahead of these old rules that have been on the books for years and years. So they have to readjust. And of course, in our legislature, everything moves very, very, very slow, as we all know.
But
And
I think in the 30-day session, there were 1,000 different
Yeah.
bills they looked at, and 130 passed. Most of them were in the 30-day session budgetary, right?
I was tracking about 90 different bills and things or f- I was tracking about 90 different things that
Yeah.
related to housing.
Just housing.
Just
Yeah.
housing, and I think maybe one or two got some traction, but
Yeah.
that was about it. Yeah. Yeah.
It is incredibly hard, especially on the 30-day session. 60 days, a
Yeah.
little bit more, if there is incentive statewide to address it. And I do believe we'll have that in 2027. We also have some issues with small towns not being able to properly collect the hospitality and lodgers taxes that they've passed. Albuquerque has an agreement with Airbnb and Verbo where they automatically pay those taxes to the city. But if you're in Grants, New Mexico, or any small town other than Albuquerque or Santa Fe, even Las Cruces has this issue. They have lodgers tax, they have hospitality tax that gets collected. That money gets paid directly into the state general fund, and the counties aren't getting their money.
Interesting. Well,
And
we had a very similar problem here related to gross receipts tax on real estate deals and
yeah,
how that gets paid, and certain municipalities weren't getting their share of it. It was going to the state and then they'd never get it. Yeah, same
yeah.
issue. Yeah.
It's a huge issue, and it
Especially
is.
these small communities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're talking just here in Albuquerque, almost $12 million in taxes come in from short-term rentals per year.
Wow.
All right. This is a huge deal. It's over 100 million in taxes statewide. And the counties and cities are not getting their money. It's just going into the general fund. It's like a rounding error up there.
Yeah.
And I think we need that money to go to our communities.
Sure.
And so that's something that will be addressed legislatively. And I think there is a lot of incentive statewide for everybody to look at this and say, what do we do here?
Yeah.
And make good decisions that support our small businesses. I do find it interesting. I've never met a politician that has ever run for office that wasn't for small businesses.
Yeah. Well,
It's the first thing you see on their website, I support small business.
Yeah, in this particular case, it's going opposite.
Right.
To wrap, Carl, what should people understand about the short-term rental world? And if they think short-term rentals are just bad, we shouldn't have them. It hurts communities. It hurts the hotel business. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say this. When you purchase a property, it comes with certain rights. Water rights, mineral rights, possibly, right?
Yep.
If you're purchasing a residential property, you may not have that, but you do have a right to rent, unless you're in an HOA, right? So there are many areas that do not allow short-term rentals. And New Mexico law does respect that. So if you're in an HOA that doesn't allow short-term rentals, you can't have a short-term rental there. There are many neighborhoods that don't like HOAs, and there's a lot of people that don't like HOAs, and they want that freedom to do with their property what they want. And I would just say, treat your neighbor like you would want to be treated. If that house comes with the right to rent the property, then we need to respect that homeowner's right to rent the property. The homeowners also need to be very responsible and rent that property in a responsible manner.
Sure.
And I do think having rules in place like the good neighbor policy are great pieces of legislation. But I also don't think that our government should be picking winners and losers between the hotel industry and the small business short-term rental. And we've seen examples of that. Recently, the city of Albuquerque tried to put a ban on short-term rentals that was a distance requirement of 250 feet per rental. At first, I thought, 250 feet, not a big deal. And then I mapped it out on Google Maps, and I realized this would effectively ban any new short-term rental host ever from opening another property.
Well, that's probably what their goal was, but
It would have made me a tremendous amount of money. Let me just say, it would have eliminated my competition. It would have eliminated the competition of the hotels, right? And a lot of hotel owners showed up in front of city council and really pushed to have that ordinance enacted. Even though I would have become more profitable from that, I really push back on that because I just think about myself coming out of college, needing extra money, and how I was able to rent my house to change the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
I don't want any law that chooses winners and losers in the private sector to be passed by our government. I want people to have the ability to go out and make money and compete with good businesses and
Yeah.
let the consumer decide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap it up there. Again, so Carl, if anybody wants to talk to you about real estate, short-term rentals in particular, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, Carl Vidal, RV Homes with R1 Property Management, and my phone number, 505-730-2275. You can also go on my website, theirvyhomes.com. I think you'll like what you see there. We've got some amazing luxury homes, and if you're coming to New Mexico to visit, or if you want to take a trip to Texas, Georgetown, Texas, Arizona, we've got some awesome properties that you can stay in. I only have one in each location. Most of them are all here in Albuquerque.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we are the Venturi Realty Group with another episode of Albuquerque Real Estate Talk. Took a deep dive into short-term rentals. I know this is a conversation that's going to continue, Carl, but we appreciate you coming in. We are at 505-448-8888. We're with Real Broker here in New Mexico. Take care.
Thank you.